computer.
Got
Hello
it.
there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. I am joined by my good friend Jonathan Hertzberg from Fun City Editions. Thank you for coming back, sir.
Thank you for having me once again, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to catch up with an old friend, but in this case, we've got a cool movie to talk about. This is the latest release from Fun City. It is T.R. Baskin. It is from 1971. It is directed by Mr. Herbert Ross. I was just looking at the chronology of where this lies in Herbert Ross's filmography, and I found it interesting because he did what, A Wonderful Town in 58, Mr. Chips in 69, and Goodbye, Mr. Chips, that is, and then Owl and the Pussycat in 70. And then he does this, and then he does Play It Again, Sam, and Last of Sheila, and so forth. And so this is just a little before, like, he starts getting into the stuff that I feel like, I mean, people definitely know him for those earlier films, but this is kind of an earlier movie for him, even. But
Mhm.
but interestingly, we were talking off mic. So this movie, outside of maybe an Australian DVD, has never really had a home video release ever, and especially in the United States.
Correct. It's never been released on any home video format, as far as I know, except for the Australian DVD that came out a few years ago, and now ours is the first Blu-ray release, and we also have a DVD release as well.
Very nice. Yeah, this is a cool one, and I think it's going to take some people hearing about it to know it is absolutely 100% worth checking out and worth picking up. It is a really, really neat movie, and I was saying to you that the more I think about it, the more I like it. For those that don't know, the basic premise, the very basic, is that Candice Bergen, circa when she's doing Carnal Knowledge, she is starring as T.R. Baskin, a woman who moves from, is it Indiana? I want to say. I think it's
It's
Indiana.
it's Ohio.
Ohio, sorry. Yes. Okay. So she's coming from Ohio, moves to the big city of Chicago, and starts trying to find her way. And so we see her sort of, getting a job, finding an apartment. All that stuff is very interesting. The use of Chicago itself is fascinating, and there's a lot of great architecture there. But her character is a really unique and interesting one because she's always kind of pushing the boundaries with everybody that she meets. She likes to sort of be a little offbeat, a little sarcastic, and sort of test the sense of humor and sensibility of everybody she meets. And for the most part, everybody fails that test. There's a couple people that she encounters that seem to get her and get what she's like, but for the most part, it's a portrait of a person who's not connecting with the big city folk ultimately.
Yeah, yes, and I think that the sarcasm that comes from the character and some of the biting comments, that her sense of humor is also a protective. It's a form of protection for her as well, because of course she's from the small town in Ohio. Now she's in the big city, and presumably she's still she's pretty young. She doesn't have a lot of life experience, work experience, etc. So it can be a way to kind of protect yourself, that that kind of that kind of sense of humor.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of those things it's a little hard at first to kind of know what her deal is. You're kind of just like, and that's one of the things that I kind of love about the movie is, like I said, the more I think about her, the more engaged and the more I really want to understand and sympathize with this character. But she meets a few people that she aligns with. The first of which, well, okay, yeah, chronologically, because this has a really interesting structure too, because it opens with a scene of her. Well, actually, it opens with Peter Boyle, who's one of the stars of the movie, along with James Caan, and Boyle and Caan meet each other, and they Boyle's from out of town, and he is looking for a good time, and he asks for James Caan's recommendation. They're old frat brothers, I guess, although Caan doesn't really seem to remember him. And for whatever reason, Caan recommends T.R. Baskin, and so he calls her to come to his hotel room. And that is a really fascinating device because what we have is the hotel room scene is sort of stretched out throughout the movie. It's broken up by these flashbacks that lead up to that scene. And I think that's another thing that's tricky upon first watch is you're like, what is happening with this scene?
Mhm.
And there's an ongoing, and this came up in the commentary too, which is a really solid commentary from the 70 movies I saw in the 70s, gentlemen. The idea that Peter Boyle might get violent at some point because this is the time of Joe and he's coming off of that. So there's this whole
Mhm.
tension of that scene, but then we see the flashback leading up to that, flashbacks of her getting an apartment, getting a job, meeting James Caan, who's another guy that she connects with. And then so it sort of plays, it's a really interesting structure. It's written by Peter Hyams, who I guess was it one of his first big scripts or something like that?
I think it's his first script. It's
Oh,
his
great.
first produced script. Yeah, yeah. He was a TV news journalist in Chicago, and this is notable that it's a Chicago movie because there weren't a lot of Chicago movies made at that time. So this is kind of a rare look at the city at that time, and Peter Hyams brings that insider perspective to it. You could tell that the makers of the film, or at least some of the makers of the film, have a real feeling for Chicago, which Peter Hyams did and still does.
Yeah, no, I think he said we can get to his interview a little bit later, but he talked about how many, in terms of the architecture, there's like 32 Frank Lloyd Wright buildings in Chicago.
Something
And
like that.
yeah, it's just like a really rich city in terms of the architecture. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
from the Midwest. You lived in Chicago for a while.
yeah, yeah.
So we know this town, but it's a
A
cool
lot of
thing.
people don't know that.
No, it's true. It's true. It's a
Yeah,
town.
for
It's
those. Sorry,
no,
I'm
go ahead.
interrupting.
Go
No,
ahead.
no, I was just going to reiterate that for those who don't know, Chicago is one of the great architecture cities in the country. And one of the best things you could do if you visit is to take the river tour. It's a boat tour that takes you all around the city, and they point out all of the notable architectural the notable buildings, the notable architecture around the city, and it's a great way to get that appreciation for it and be introduced to the city. Whenever people would visit me, that's what we would do, is do the architecture boat tour. But do it you got to do that in the summer. It's got to be nice out.
Yeah, no, it's really like I have been there, but not enough considering that I'm from the Midwest. And so I really appreciated just even like the beginning of the film. She gets off the plane uh in Chicago O'Hare, and there's this winter overcast look. The just the color of the sky and the light, it really reminded me of home in a way. It reminded me of like out in California, we don't have that. I mean, we
Yeah,
have overcast days, but it's just a very specific look that I was like, oh man, that's really neat. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
as a backdrop, it's a beautiful place to set a movie, and they really do take advantage of that. There's a lot of great shots of her walking around the city and things like that I think really benefits the movie in a big way. But yeah, so she is really a fascinating character. She meets through these flashbacks, we see that she meets Marsha Rod, who's a great actor that I love from Little Murders.
Mm-hmm.
She works at this bank, I guess, and she's a typist at this bank. And well, at least that's what her job, that's what TR Baskin's job is. I feel like Marsha Rod works almost like with HR.
She's HR. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's some kind of big financial institution, and they have this huge sort of brutalist office tower that where they work, and the movie gets a lot of mileage out of showing just sort of the the almost the way it sucks the humanity out of everybody in there, because everything kind of takes on this robotic kind of rote rhythm. Everything is like, this is how it's done. You have this many minutes for your cigarette or lunch break, and there's all these like voices coming out of the like the PA system. There's all these disembodied voices, like kind of giving instructions and whatnot.
Yeah,
Which,
that's a neat aspect of the movie. It reminded me of The Apartment a little bit, just in terms of the amount of desks they sometimes have and things like that.
yeah,
But just the idea that she goes to the initial HR thing and they're like, oh no, you have to go to a different desk because we only handle last names that begin with this,
Right,
and you're
right.
a B. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's how she meets Marsha Rod. Marsha Rod deals with the Bs.
The
And
bees.
just the idea that this company is so massive that you have
Yeah.
one HR person that only deals with the last names of B, and that's it, is
There's
pretty
also
crazy.
something, there's also, I just thought about this now, but this reminds me that there are other films from this same time period that sort of comment on the the modernity, the sort of incoming technology, this incoming technological sort of less human world that is sort of becoming more of an everyday uh kind of commonplace thing that everybody has to deal with. And I was thinking of something like around the same time, Petulia has a similar feel with some of these sort of more like automated, computerized types of buildings and places that used to be more operated by actual people. And now everything is kind of like slightly everybody's a little bit removed, which I think adds to the isolation that our main character feels. You
Absolutely. Great
know?
call out of Petulia, by the way. Another movie that could really use a Blu-ray. I'm sure at some point we might get one, but who knows? That's
Yes, it could.
great movie. Great movie.
Sure could.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating portrait to see her meeting Marsha Rod, who she does connect with, and then just kind of, dealing with a lot of pretty awful men. Ultimately,
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
there's a
A lot
blind
of
date that's
a lot of
terrible.
toxic, a lot of what now are called toxic men or male toxic toxic masculinity. Yeah.
Yes, very much. One date in particular is really just pretty awful for her, and she does what I think we'd all like to do in terms of how she handles it, and that's pretty great actually. But
Mm.
she does end up meeting one guy that she connects with, and that's James Caan's character, and it's a really neat meeting where she just sees him sitting alone in like a cafe, and kind of goes in and sits down and starts talking to him and starts laying her sort of sarcasm on him, and he immediately responds to it and kicks it back at her in a way that she's like, oh, he gets it. And they
Mm.
end up sort of, having an interlude of sorts. And that's one of the things that leads to the Peter Boyle thing, which all becomes much more interesting the first time you've completely finished the movie and you get a sense of like, okay, this is all starting to make more sense. And that's one of the reasons it's a movie that, it definitely is going to reward multiple viewings, but it is one that like I said, the more you think about it, when you get to the end, you're just like, oh, wow. Okay. I love that they decided to go this way with the structure, because had they just had that scene with Peter Boyle, which is an extended scene over the course of the movie, had they just done that as one scene, I just don't think the movie would have the same energy, but B, the same impact that it ultimately has. So I love that the structure is split up like that. It's a really neat, it feels like a 70s movie in that sense, almost like a new wavy kind of thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. It
So,
also has it's also, I would say, there are various interpretations as to the end of the movie and what might become of the character of T.R. Baskin. This is not a film though that will answer anything definitively, and
yeah,
which is good. I mean, that's another way that it's this, like, in line with other 70s movies, new American
absolutely.
cinema.
Absolutely. And that's why I think it's a really interesting one, and one that I think people should seek out. I think it's been available digitally. You can rent it digitally, but outside of that, you really can't see it anywhere else. And so is this a new scan? I assume here, new 4K restoration from the
Yeah,
original 35.
it's a
Very
yeah,
nice.
it's a new restoration, and that is also what should be streaming now, I think, is
Oh,
that new
cool.
master. At least you have to look, if you're going to go that route, you do have to look at the look at the metadata on whatever service you're looking at to make sure that it's the new master. But I
But
know that
obviously, we recommend the Blu-ray, of course.
well, you can be assured of it, yes, with the Blu-ray. Plus, you'll get all this. packaging and the extra features and stuff that are on there.
Yeah, I really do like the slipcase. Is really nice artwork on both sides, including
Yeah,
some of the secondary characters.
yeah, and
And
also the director.
oh, very nice, Herb
If you look on
Ross.
the bottom, yeah, Herbert
Yeah,
Ross. That's from a production still of Candice Bergen and Herbert Ross on the set. I wanted to make sure we had Chicago on the back there too, the
yeah,
skyline.
I like
See,
that. I
and
like that you included
that's
the side, the skyline.
yeah, that's like the skyline from that era. Obviously it looks a lot different now with many more buildings that weren't you know existing then
Yeah,
50 years ago.
it's a really like all the parts together really come into this wonderful mix for me in terms of these actors. I'm a huge fan of her. I'm a big fan of Candice Bergen, and just the kinds of characters she would play. And this is one of the most interesting I've seen her play. But to have the Peter Boyles and the James Caans in the background, um, really doing interesting stuff. This is for me, like the Boyle character is also one of the more interesting characters I've seen him play, because I have preconceived notions about what he's going to do, and he doesn't do that. He does something else as far as I'm concerned, you know?
I never thought Peter Boyle when I saw this movie. Unlike you, I wasn't thinking, oh, he was Joe, so that means he's possibly going to get violent. Because I've seen Peter Boyle do so many other things,
True.
and it's kind of apparent from the beginning of the movie, where we are introduced to him and James Caan. I don't know. I just felt like, oh, he's harmless in that sense. Yeah, but it's funny. I don't want to give too much away. I will say that the movie was marketed in a lot of ways as a comedy, but is certainly as much more a a dramedy, and it's much more of more of a serious character piece. And as we mentioned, a lot of the comedy comes out of that character, as a coping mechanism, as a way of adding a protective shield to her, as she navigates this big cold city. And I don't mean that it doesn't mean that it's like a takedown of Chicago in any way. It's just because it just is what it is. It's big, and it's like a lot of major cities. They can really chew you up and spit you out if you're there before your time, if you don't really know what you're doing. And that's her character in a lot of ways. But also I think her character is, like, as we mentioned, because of her like sarcasm, and also because the character is never really shown to be like looking for things that uh a lot of she's not looking for things like in a stereotypical kind of 1950s way, say. Like, she's not in the movie to go get a man right from the start or anything like that. Like, you could tell that I think, the James Caan character, for instance, what you noted is important. He's reading a book. The first time she sees him, he's sitting by himself reading a book, and it's in a diner, not in a bar, not in a party or anything like that. And I think that speaks a lot to that her character has an intellectual curiosity. Her character is looking for not necessarily somebody that's wealthy, who's gonna just set her up for life. She's looking for some more stimulation, more intellectual stimulation. And
Yeah.
you think that maybe she's going to get that from James Caan's character, but
Yeah, we don't have to go into specifics, but yeah, it's a neat role for him too. I mean, I've seen him do some interesting stuff like this
yeah,
before as well, but I love him in this sort of non-tough guy kind of role. He did
yeah.
when he did
He's a
break
little
away
he always has a little bit of the tough guy
a little bit.
in him. Yeah, he always
Yeah.
has a little bit of that. Like in this movie, he's supposed to have been. He talks about having been in the army or something, right? So he has a little bit of uh, a more more of a tough guy. That to me indicates, he's got a little bit of a ruggedness, and to him still. And even though, as I said, as we said, he's reading a book and he's a writer, I think in his character. So yeah, he's certainly as far away from another great Chicago character he played about a decade later, Frank in Michael Mann's Thief, and obviously very far away from Sonny Corleone, in which he'd be playing in the next year, and also very far away from Brian from Brian's Song, which Brian Piccolo, who he was going to play also right after he did this movie. So this is right as James Caan is going to like move into superstar territory right before that. And then
Yeah.
Peter Boyle was just coming off of Joe, which was obviously a big part for him. So, and then Candice Bergen, as you mentioned, Carnal Knowledge and Getting Straight with Elliot Gould was around this time.
Yeah.
Well, but
Yeah. She's doing.
I think she gets unfairly maligned, her acting. And as like the joke was always that she was wooden, and it was like related to the fact that her father was a famous ventriloquist and that she had like her brother growing up was his wooden puppet, you know.
Edgar
So
Bergen, we're talking about, of course.
yeah, right.
Yeah, I forgot
So
about that completely.
yeah.
But yeah, no, it's true that she
I'm
did
sure
get.
it comes up in the commentary,
It
and I'm
does.
sure it's in the booklet essay, and Peter
Yeah.
Hyams might even mention it in the interview that we did with him. So
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say we can talk about that stuff too. Some really nice features here. The interview with Hyams, 14 and a half minutes or so, uh immediately got my attention because he's wearing an Onion t-shirt, which is, of course, a publication that started where you and I went to college in Madison, and is obviously a publication that's about sarcasm and satire, and so that's
yeah,
kind of perfect. And I'm sure that's not necessarily an accident on his part. But yeah,
we didn't comment on it. I mean, I wasn't actually at the shoot, but
yeah,
no, we didn't ask him to wear that.
I
So
just thought it was funny that he chose that.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I'm a
you can tell
huge.
he's a funny guy though, even though he hasn't done a lot of comedies per se. Yeah, you
Oh
can
yeah,
tell.
I mean, I would, but like, he hasn't done Busting just yet. That's a couple years from now, but there's a lot of great comedy in that. And then of course he goes on to make a lot of even bigger films. But
Mm,
Busting has been the one I've been most focused on the last 5, 6 years, because I really think it's just a masterpiece of a cop buddy cop drama.
mhm.
But a totally different kind of thing than this. So I love that
Right,
he's
right.
a dude who can do a lot of different stuff, but he has a lot of great insights into, how this came about and his history. Like you said, working as an anchor man or whatever, and talking about Chicago, talking about the cast. It's a really neat interview with him. Like, he's the
Mhm.
kind of guy where I could have spent, a couple hours just listening to him talk about Hollywood, about filmmaking, about literally whatever. Like, he's just a jovial, intelligent, funny guy that you just enjoy hanging out with, So it's good stuff.
Yeah, we were honored to have him, and yeah, I mean, obviously, this is the beginning of his career in movies. It's pretty incredible because, like you said, he was a news he was an anchor he was a TV news anchor and reporter, and but clearly had other ambitions. And the thing that I think is interesting about this movie is that so much of Peter Hyams, a lot of his popular films are more, let's say, masculine action movies, science fiction movies, thrillers, and yet this movie is really none of those things and is focused on a woman character. And interestingly, a lesser known film that he did a couple years after this one, which I'm a big fan of, and I know Larry Karaszewski is a big fan of it because I think I found out about it because of a Trailers from Hell or something that he did. Called it's a movie called Our Time, which came out a couple years after this, which is like a 50s period film set in like an all girls school, and it's sort of like dealing with one of the characters having to undergo an illegal abortion because it's set in the 50s. Anyway, we talked. I think we did try to kind of get that out of him, like, people know you for this, and yet you have these films early in your career, which are speaking to more of a female experience and perspective. And I thought it was interesting. What he said was that, he and his wife were really committed to the civil rights movement and women's rights, and at that time. And so I think he gets into a little bit that where this character came from and who she's maybe inspired by. I would like to get even maybe a little bit more from him, but we got what we got.
Yeah,
I get the sense that he was basing some of her experiences in this movie on things that either he saw, maybe either maybe some things that his wife relayed to him, or other women friends relayed to him. It has that feeling. It doesn't feel like it's all. I mean, everything in this movie could have happened. It's all very, very, very feels very real.
Universal. Yeah. It's interesting because it is almost, there is a heightened quality to it, but there is a great real quality to it at the same time. It's a really interesting balance, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so compelling. I mean, beyond the performances, which are great, and the backdrop, which is great. It's really, really just a neat movie that has really, wormed its way into my head and made me keep thinking about it and wanting to rewatch it again. So I can't recommend this one enough. You guys also have a really nice commentary track from Ben Reiser and Scott Lucas from the 70 movies we saw in the 70s podcast, a really great show.
And they're Chicago and Madison based guys. So I really want, and both have a lot of experience in know Chicago. I wanted that. I wanted to make sure we had Chicago voices on this Blu-ray, because it is a Chicago movie, and I feel that, I don't have to say this, but Chicago people know I don't really have to say this, but Chicago and the Midwest in general gets overlooked a lot. So I thought it was important. This is a rare Chicago movie that we have people that can really speak to the local, the regional aspects of it, the things that really are unique to that area that this movie portrays.
Yeah, I thought that was a great thing to have them do it. I mean, they're even able to identify locations in the film. They're able to talk about things that are now where some of the locations were. Just it's a commentary that covers a lot of aspects. But I did really appreciate a lot of the Chicago flavor of the track. That was a really nice choice on that level. Great commentary. Would love to hear these guys again on another track. I definitely enjoy their chemistry and what they had to say. And then, as you said, you have an essay as well. We have a little booklet inside, and the essay is by Kat Sachs, which I haven't had a chance to go through the essay just yet. But
she's also Chicago-based film writer, critic.
Excellent.
And again, her essay really speaks to the Chicago aspects, among other things, in the film. I think the essay is called "Girl Meets Chicago."
Nice.
So,
no, I love that you've made that choice, and that you have, expanded Fun City. I mean, even more than this, you've done LA Fun City, you've done Chicago Fun City, you've done obviously Fun City New York, but the fact that you've expanded from just New York to a lot of different areas, I've really enjoyed seeing the progression of the label to this point, and I think this movie is just a great fit for everything else that you've done. It just is a really great undiscovered gem, and even more undiscovered than I think some of the great gems you've already pulled out. I would put this up with, like, I mean, I Start Counting is a completely different kind of movie, but in terms of its profile, I feel like less people knew that movie before you released it, and now a lot more people do. Same thing will go for this, I hope.
I think so, yeah. This is a movie that people that have been digging through record bins for decades will recognize the soundtrack, because the soundtrack album was pretty ubiquitous. It's not an expensive record. It's a good record. The music's by Jack Elliott, also known as Ramblin' Jack Elliott, who appears in one of the extra scenes in Jim McBride's Breathless.
Oh, nice.
Coincidentally. And he did the score. So I knew this movie from seeing that soundtrack cover so many times, which has the very recognizable key art with Candice Bergen and Peter Boyle behind him, which you can see on the cover here. Yeah, so that same key art, U.S. key art, and look at you turned it perfectly, so there's no glare.
That's right.
And another thing that we did with the packaging is we sort of were kind of calling out the old school classic Paramount home video style template for their home video releases. And this movie never had a release from Paramount at that time. So this is kind of like what we would have imagined it would have looked like.
I love that you do that. I love that you go back to the old VHS templates. I mean, even just the layout on the back. If people remember the Paramounts, it was very much like this with like visual pictures.
I wrote a synopsis on the back for it that I kind of emulated what it would have, I thought how it would have read, or how it would have been written if it had been on one of those VHS, if it had a VHS release back then.
That's awesome.
Tape.
I love that stuff. I'm like you. I'm very nostalgic for even just like the two-tone look here, where you have a colored banner at the bottom. That was something that they used to do a lot with these.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's exactly how this would have looked like this, except obviously the ratio, the dimensions would be different. But yeah, the billing block is in the Paramount font and everything.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I love that. I love the detail, man.
It's Fun City, and that's fun stuff to do. It's not that difficult either.
No, but I love it. It's the kind of thing that really stands out, especially over time as you look at the releases and put them together and just see all the attention to detail that you put into all these, just in terms of the packaging alone, let alone the films. I love that stuff in terms of the cohesiveness of the label and its output overall. I have to wrap this up, unfortunately, but do you have any closing thoughts on T.R. Baskin? Any things you want to put in the ear of folks that are considering picking this one up?
Well, you can order it now. We're shipping it from Fun City Editions headquarters, which you see behind me here. You can see we also have our T-shirts there.
Oh, nice.
This is the warehouse here. and yeah, we're shipping T.R. Baskin. And also, if you order from us, we always end up getting original materials like lobby cards and stills and posters and all, press books and all that kind of stuff to help us put the package together. And so certain orders, I'll stash something else like that in the order, like, randomly a lobby card or something. That's all behind me here. You can kind of see it.
Nice.
Anyway, so if you order from us, you might get a little something extra.
And, so funcityeditions.com is where they should go to place that order?
funcityeditions.com, and you can find it many other places as well, wherever you prefer to shop. But we love when you place your orders directly with us.
Absolutely. That's highly recommended. I'll leave a note below with that website and the actual link to order this movie. But like I said, it's a discovery for me. It's a gem. It's something I'm so glad you put out. And I'm going to probably watch it again before the end of the year, just because I've been thinking about it a lot since that first watch. Looks great. Obviously the transfer looks great, and the extras are top notch as usual. So
just one other thing about how it looks. It was shot by Jerry Hirschfeld, the cinematographer, who, if you look him up, he has quite a resume. And around this time, he also shot some films for Frank Perry, including a film with love called Last Summer.
Oh, beautiful.
This one. And he also I think shot some other films for Herbert Ross. I think he shot Young Frankenstein as well.
Oh, beautiful.
So there's another Peter Boyle. But yeah, so it's in that vein. It makes sense if you look at some of the other films that Hirschfeld shot. They are other films that the audience that share an audience with the audience, or the ideal audience for this film. So
yeah, I was just looking at his filmography. I mean, My Favorite Year, Neighbors, you said Young Frankenstein, The Car, 2 Minute Warning, lots of cool stuff. The Dion Brothers, very nice. Oh, this is quite a
Yeah.
treasure trove of stuff. Yeah. So then Diary of a Mad Housewife. I should mention that's another film he
Oh, he
shot.
shot he shot that one as well.
And I
Yeah, so
think
he
that,
shot a yeah. What's
well, I was
that?
going to say it's mentioned in the commentary as well, but I think that's a movie that kind of is in a ballpark with this movie in terms of a
Sure.
woman going through an experience with some difficult men trying to find her way.
And
Uh,
in a harsh urban setting as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say fans of that movie should consider this one as something else you could check out in
For
that
sure.
vein, you know?
For sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
lots of great stuff from Hirschfeld and yeah, just a really solid choice. And I just want to thank you again for coming by to say things about the movie and to chat with me.
It's always a pleasure, Brian, and I really appreciate your having me on and look
Uh,
forward to it again soon.
yes, we will be talking about I think we can say the apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. That'll probably
Yes.
be December, I think, because that's December 12th, I think is the street date for that, if I recall.
Yes, 12/12 is the street date for the apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. That is
Yes.
a worldwide Blu-ray premiere and a US DVD and Blu-ray premiere.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I can't wait for that one too. With that, I'm just as excited to talk about that. Another great 70s character piece
Mhm.
with Richard Dreyfuss in a lesser known, I think, role for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
keep doing the
Well,
great stuff, sir.
I will. And that's both this film, T.R. Baskin and Duddy Kravitz were both at the time that they were released, one of the movies that was used as a comparison, like in some of the review quotes and press materials and such, was The Graduate. These are very much also postgraduate kinds of movies.
Yeah, I believe that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff, sir. Again, funcityeditionscott.com. Go over there and check it out. Follow Fun City on their socials to keep an eye on things that they are releasing. I know there's going to be more exciting stuff coming in 2024, and I can't wait. But I will talk to you again soon, sir. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.